Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm going to play host again. My name is Dan Sisick, and I'm here in sunny Las Vegas right now. I'm going to let my friends Samantha, Lori, Catherine, and Angel jump out and introduce themselves before we get started on the book that we currently have started called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Here's a copy of it. And so I will let everybody jump out and say hi.
Good morning, it's Samantha in Indiana.
Good morning, it's Angel Baker down here in South Carolina.
And good morning, Lori in Denver.
Good morning, it's Catherine Clement, and I'm the reader, or usually the reader, not always the reader, but today I am. So we are at the top of page 15. If you're in the hard copy, I'm not sure about on the ebook, but the section is called Focusing on You. Now turn your attention to yourself. Did you answer yes to those 3 questions I posed at the beginning of the chapter? If you did, you've taken the first crucial step in the journey. If you got a no or a maybe, let's explore why you might resist the idea. So let me go back and reread the questions that he posed. One is, am I willing to increase the amount of time every day that I feel good inside? The next is, am I willing to increase the amount of time that my whole life goes well? And the third one is, am I willing to feel good and have my life go well all the time? So those were the questions. When you consider the possibility of consistently feeling good and having things go well in your life all the time, you may find yourself thinking, that's not possible. If so, I understand. I once felt that way too. I urge you, though, not to waste much of your precious time worrying about whether it's possible. I've proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that it is. The only relevant question is whether you will let it be possible for you. If you would be willing to accept that possibility, you're on the way to experiencing real magic in your life. I've asked thousands of people if they would be willing to feel good and have things go well all the time. And I've had the great joy of watching what happens in their lives when they say yes. I would love for you to enjoy the same results, as it all starts with a sincere yes to those 3 questions. If you feel resistance and would like to explore it, you can begin by letting yourself know that it's quite natural to feel that way. After all, human beings have very little experience with consciously cultivating the ability to feel more and more positive energy. There wasn't a class in elementary school or college called How to Tolerate Longer Periods of Success and Good Feeling. I think it's remarkable that we can go all the way from kindergarten to a PhD or MD without anybody mentioning something so fundamental. But that's the world we live in at present. We're going to change that world, though, and we're going to reap phenomenal benefits from doing it. There's an even bigger reason you might feel some resistance about transcending your upper limit problem. Speaking personally, I found that my biggest resistance was the fear of owning my full potential. As I explored this fear, I realized that making such a commitment put everything on the line. It eliminated any excuse I'd ever allowed myself for failing to achieve what I set out to do. In the past, I could always say, well, I failed, but I wasn't really trying hard. Maybe I'd have succeeded if I had really tried. Or I failed, but I might have succeeded if I hadn't gotten sick. But now, after making the commitment to going the distance, any excuse that crept into my mind somehow or sounded hollow, even ridiculous, as if Columbus had sailed back to Europe and said, well, we didn't find land, but we might have if I hadn't gotten a nasty cold. Many of our fears are based on the workings of the ego, the part of us that's focused on getting recognition and protecting us from social ostracism. In the zone of genius, your ego is unnecessary. Living there is its own reward. In the zone of genius, you cease to care about recognition or ostracism. Once you make a commitment to inhabiting your full potential, your ego is suddenly faced with extinction. It's been making excuses for you throughout your life. Now, if your commitment to taking the big leap is sincere, your ego will need to be shown the door. Unless you're lucky, your ego will probably not go quietly. It has a lifetime of employment history behind it. Faced with annihilation, your ego will set off a smoke bomb of fear. It will attempt to sabotage you by telling you tall tales of the terrors you'll experience if you take the big leap into your zone of genius. Using the smokescreen of fear as your own inner IMAX, it will project pictures of financial ruin and other disasters sure to befall you. All this is understandable because fear is always about the unknown. This is unknown territory. Your ego has never been in this fix before. Ultimately, fear will be banished because fear disappears when you're fully engaged in the zone of genius. Until you get there, though, you'll find yourself befogged more than once. Fortunately, this territory has been mapped out. There's something to help you find the way through, although it is probably unlike any navigational tool you've used in the past. The way through. There's only one way to get through the fog of fear, and that's to transform it into the clarity of exhilaration. One of the greatest pieces of wisdom I've ever heard comes from Fritz Paris, MD, the psychiatrist and founder of Gestalt therapy. He said, "Fear is excitement without the breath." Here's what this intriguing statement means. The very same mechanisms that produce excitement also produce fear, and any fear can be transformed into excitement by breathing fully with it. On the other hand, excitement turns into fear quickly if you hold your breath. When scared, most of us have a tendency to try to get rid of the feeling. We think we can get rid of it by denying it or ignoring it, and we use holding our breath as a physical tool of denial. It never works, though, because as Dr. Pearls has pointed out, the less breath you feed your fear, the bigger your fear gets. The best advice I can give you is to take big, easy breaths when you feel fear. Feel the fear instead of pretending it's not there. Celebrate it with a big breath, just the way you'd celebrate a birthday by taking a big breath and blowing out all the candles on your cake. Do that, and your fear turns into excitement. Do it more, and your excitement.
We just lost, oh, there she's back.
Sorry, where did I drop off?
Right after you blow
I
out all
can't.
the candles.
Okay, right after the candles. All right, thank you. Blowing out all the candles on your cake. Do that, and your fear turns into excitement. Do it more, and your excitement turns into exhilaration. I find it very empowering to know that I'm in charge of the exhilaration I feel as I go through life. I bet you will too. When you reach the end of your life and are wondering whether it's all been worthwhile, you'll be measuring whether you did everything you possibly could with the gifts you've been given. When I was growing up, my next door neighbor, Mr. Lewin, shared a powerful bit of wisdom with me. I've kept it in my mind for more than 50 years. On Judgment Day, Mr. Lewin said, God will not ask, "Why were you not Moses?" He will ask, Why were you not Sam Lewin? The goal in life is not to attain some imaginary ideal. It is to find and fully use our own gifts. The meaning of that saying was clear even to a 10-year-old who sends long overdue thanks to Mr. Lewin, a successful 70-year-old businessman, when I knew him, for his willingness to shoot the breeze on many a Florida afternoon with a philosophically inclined kid. So do you want me to keep going or stop?
Why don't we stop here? Kind of chew on what we've read so far, because I think if we go into the next part, that gets into some of the steps, and I'm sure we'll pull out stuff from what we've read right now. And then if we get that covered, we can go ahead and read on. Sound okay with everybody?
Thumbs up.
So I'm going to throw out something, and this is just something I just noticed this time around. And when we started with where it said focusing on you, and he asked about, if we said yes to the answering those first three questions, and maybe I'm getting a little picky on how I'm reading it, or maybe how I interpret two of the word questions, because they sound very similar to me. So maybe that will help me understand it a little. The first one is the second question out of the three questions in the beginning of the book. Am I willing to increase the amount of time that my whole life goes well? And then the third one, am I willing to feel good and have my life go well all the time? To me, both those questions sound very similar and in some ways the same. So I don't know if it's maybe how I'm looking at them or how I'm reading it. And if there is a difference overall into being able to, go ahead and go, or if I'm just playing with semantics and it doesn't really matter as long as I answer them and go ahead and move into. So I don't know. I don't know if anybody else had that thought, but that kind of just hit me a little bit as we reviewed those as we were going over in the beginning of this next portion on focusing on you.
I feel like that second question is the two-part thing. It's like the first question is, am I willing to increase the amount of time my whole life goes well? But then the second question, am I also willing to feel good while my whole life goes well? I think that's the kind of a two-part thing, is he's trying to say that, things may be going well for us, but we aren't feeling good about it for whatever reason. We're telling ourselves we don't deserve it. We're telling ourselves that we shouldn't be doing it or having it or experiencing it for some silly reason or another. It's like when he was feeling good early in the chapter, and then he started thinking the thoughts about his daughter, like he was making himself feel bad because he was feeling good. So I think that's what he's kind of getting at by asking that second question. Welcome, Jason. Welcome.
Welcome, Jason. And also, I think that, good morning. Also, I think that question 2 is only out of context like that if you disregard question 1. So if you start with 1, it's like, am I willing to increase the amount of time every day? And then question 2 is, am I willing to increase the amount of time that my whole life goes well? It's kind of working you up. And then am I willing to just like, am I willing to go to the pool and like take my robe off, and then am I willing to step up onto the diving board is question 2, and then am I willing to jump into the pool is question 3.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Beautiful analogy, Catherine.
Okay, so
Where
everybody,
it is,
oh,
since I don't go to pools.
I was just gonna say, and if it's me, depends on how I am at that time, because there have been times where I've just kind of said, "Oh, screw it, I'm just going to jump in the pool." So I just have to deal with getting wet and dealing with it, the water being colder in the beginning, and then I'll get used to it. There are other times I take forever to get in the pool because, uh, I'd rather have it be like 80 or 90 degrees when I jump in, and that way it's automatically warm already. So, um, yeah, I think for me it could be a either or thing. And so in looking at this, maybe for me it might be a little of the either or on how I look at those questions.
Growing
You
up
know,
in Florida ruined me. And Jason, you can confirm that. Growing up in Florida ruins you because you have to have warm water all the time, not cool water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
warm water's good.
I mean, we got a pool this year with this house, and that's been an interesting experience because I've never had a pool before. I mean, when I was a kid, I was in the pool all the time, didn't care whether it was warm or cold or whatever. But here, like, it's got to be 84 with heavy humidity for me to be willing to get in the pool, because the pool is like maybe 80 degrees, and that sounds warm, but when it's water and then the air is cool blowing out, no, it's chilly. It's chilly. So yeah.
well, you got to jump in fast because it makes it easier, Dan. You don't just go in a toe at a time. Going all the way and it goes away faster.
I know, that's why I said sometimes I have that mindset. It's like, oh, screw it, I'm just going to deal with it and jump in the deep part, so that way I can't, and other times it's like I know it's cold and I'm cold, and I'm, it's like maybe towards the beginning of summer when it's not hot, but it's still, and you're like, but you want to go in the pool, or towards the end of summer when it's starting. And so, but I'm weird like that anyway. So, but it's, but I can get the analogy of how this works even in our lives, because there have been times when I've gone balls to the wall where I'm just going to do this. I don't care. Like when I made the final decision to start Ubering full time, that was a scary decision. I wasn't sure if I was going to fail or flop, or if I was, because I'd been doing it part time, and I've been doing okay part time, but that was just extra part time money to go on top of what I was making. So it helped, but it wasn't what I was relying on. So then now when I switched to relying on it, it's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I had to kind of really go with it because I had made that decision. But once I made the decision, I was like, okay, I'm fine with it. And then other times in life, I've tried to do stuff, and it's like I've tiptoed and backtracked and then tiptoed a little more. So, but I think that's how we are as humans. If we're honest, there are times where, we'll be that bold and daring person, and something gets in us, and we'll let caution go away. And as he puts it here, grab onto that exhilaration of the power of the unknown being what keeps us going, rather than the power of the unknown making us shy away, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've been faced with this a lot in the last, few years. Well, I mean, I'm always faced with it, and particularly with this trucking business and everything that we have going on with that. And it's been so, I find myself like, the ego, my ego self is sitting here telling me all this doom and gloom. And if we do this thing, it's going to, it's not going to work, or it's going to, cause us to end up in financial ruin or whatever. Or like my biggest thing right now. It's like we need to hire some people, to work with us. But people are so unpredictable. And it's hard to get to know somebody in a really short period of time. And yet at the same time, I'm like, here I am, the person is like, oh, it's just a job. I get to, drive a truck or whatever. And then for me, I'm like, everything is on the line when you hire this person. You give them this huge responsibility, and it's so scary as a with everything, my whole everything, financial, house, everything, all on the line. And I, have this kind of doom and gloom when I'm faced with some big major choice of, oh, okay, should I hire a person? I mean, it seems like a minor thing when you're thinking, oh, people hire people all the time, and yet for me, I have these things that come up my head, and I'm like, what if they aren't a safe driver? What if they are a distracted driver? What if they're this? What if they're that? And they crash and something happens, and and then I'm ruined. It's like all because I'm like trying to just have this more abundance in our life and create more security, and it's like this just. But I had to really kind of pay attention to when I like that he talks about the holding your breath or breathing, and I kind of listen to myself sometimes and think about, okay, how much of the time am I holding my breath? It's like every time I'm confronted with some new question or new challenge or new whatever, and I'm like holding my breath going, "Ugh," and then I'm like, but we need to do this thing. And so I like this idea that he talks about just breathing more. And am I willing to accept the possibility that things could go well? That's a weird concept, to think that you might not be willing to accept that it could possibly go well. I tend to always have this attitude of, if we do something, it's going to be doom and gloom. I'm waiting for the shit to hit the fan. It's like everything seems to be going along great. What's going to happen to screw it all up, and not really thinking, well, maybe I'm the one that's going to sabotage it subconsciously. So I've been really trying to let go of these feelings of fear and let go of this anxiety that comes up inside of me, that is obviously from previous experiences. It's not about what's going on right now. It's this previous stuff that's happened, and all these fears. And I love this idea of just kind of that I'm the one that is saying that it's all going to go to shit at some point, that I can change that. I can change that idea, or I can change that feeling. I can look at things as if it could go. I don't know why I never really thought that was a possibility, that it could just continuously go good. I have this kind of idea in my head that life is a roller coaster, and that it you have your up times, you have your down times, and that you keep on going back and forth between the good and the bad, or the pleasant and the unpleasant. Is it possible for it to just continually get better and better without having shit hit the fan? That's an interesting concept. I like that idea. And maybe the shit that hits the fan isn't as major as I think that it's going to be, that it's just minor things that are completely overcomable. And maybe that isn't even true. Maybe that's still just I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, and I think he does too, because if you think about it, and I was just sitting here as you were talking about some, I'm trying to think of those times where when I have been afraid, or when I've been a little fearful, I have tended to kind of suck my breath in and hold it in, and like, for fear of, if I breathe out, it'll make something happen that I don't want to happen. And it's that fear issue, and that's why I'm holding it in, because at this moment right now, it's all good, it's all okay. So I don't want to but I also have thought of those times when I've been really exhilarated and I've just been breathing heavily and I'm just really in it and, and in that full emotion. And it's such a different feeling. And when you're in that feeling, you want to keep going in that feeling. And I think it's hard for us to, and I think one of the things we need to do is rather instead of, and I think this might be, I hope I'm picking up on something that he might bring up later, and I'm hoping he does, is if we, instead of focus on the things of the past that were the bad things, but if we look at the things of the past that ultimately were the good things because we dared to go do it and the exhilaration that came out of that. And if we replace that in that moment and then do that breathing, like you were saying, let go of that, holding that breath, but breathe in and take those big breaths and then say, okay, when I did this, it was good. When I did that, it was good. When I let go and accepted and encompassed that exhilaration, it always worked out good. So let me move forward in that and kind of block out the negative that we tend to always go to. And maybe that might be part of how you do move into that sphere and you do start allowing more to happen. I'm also going to throw this out. I still think there are outside forces that sometimes that come in that you have no control over and that may affect you, but I still think in the way you respond and how you look at it can allow you to navigate it better. So that way, maybe it doesn't overtake you as much as it does, or maybe you have a quicker recovery period back to where you're back moving forward into the good too. Because I still think there are times in life where that pendulum still swings back and forth, and you still have to deal with the natural things going out there in the world that do affect you. So I think that's, but I think it goes back again to how we portray it and deal with it, and going back into our mind is our most best ally sometimes.
I definitely, oh,
No, go
We're-
ahead, dear. I was
we're
trying
bad
to let
about
you
that,
come
aren't we,
out.
Catherine?
I really was. I was trying to let you come out. So
And I was trying to let somebody else. Anyway, most recently is the whole idea that we have to let go of what we don't have control of. Obviously, I'm in a very tricky predicament there, and learning that breathing is, you can't, with the way things are in society, you want to try and grab onto as many things as you can, like hoard the toilet paper or whatever, in case there, excuse me, in case you can't get it next. And your breath, if you try to breathe in more and more, you just can't do it. It can only have a certain limit, and you have to exhale and blow out those candles, or it's just a very difficult thing. And watching my friends get so upset and all in uproar that, oh, your elevator can't be broken all this time, that just is not acceptable. And I'm like, what a choice do I have? But I have to accept. And if I tried holding my breath all that time, I'd be dead. But just trying to take a deep breath and think, okay, it's going to be okay. I'll be all right. I'm not going to die in all this. So it is definitely how you respond.
I love that he's talking about breath as well, because you're right, Laura, it is in how you respond. But we are human beings and our bodies work somewhat predictably as far as chemically and stuff. And so one of the really curious things right now is, are people finding hacks to get to things quicker, all kinds of hacks, but especially there's a lot of hacks around the body, and there's a lot of focus right now about like the vagal nerve and how you can stimulate the vagal nerve, or you can do certain things to make your body do other things, right? And so some of these chemicals in our bodies, I've always said that's one of the reasons why psychiatric labels, because these things that we feel in our body, these sensations, what I'll call them, are so subjective to interpretation, not only by the person reporting, but by the person they're reporting to. So you've got two, the feeling that my body that I may interpret as excitement, someone else may interpret as anxiety, but they're the same physical sensation. Do you see what, like if we were to report, what, my heart rate is increased and my breathing is quickened, and if we were to report the same symptoms, the way I interpret them and the way the doctor interprets them is going to be different. And breathing puts it back into your control. I mean, it's always been in our control, obviously, but of course the sages have been speaking of this for eons, and a lot of people look at that stuff and they say, oh, that's so woo-woo. It's not woo-woo, like it's science, it's physical, it's chemical, and thoughts lead to feelings. And once you get to feelings, then you really start flooding the body with these chemicals, right? So, but it begins with the thoughts. So these thoughts that thoughts are good. Don't get me wrong. Without thoughts, we wouldn't be here right now discussing this book and our thoughts about it, obviously, right? We're pretty engrossed in thoughts in this group. But as far as navigating your daily life, you have to realize and recognize how much your thoughts are working against you rather than for you, and change that. And of course, that's what every book that we've ever read has been about. But, it's just a more reinforcement for us that thoughts are not real, and they're something that we experience, but we can have thoughts about those thoughts and change the way we think about those thoughts before it gets to a feeling, and that gets to a belief. And like, we see how this works, we understand the process, right? So if we can just catch ourselves in the beginning and recognize, oh, that thought's not real, but look at the possibility of this, like Samantha, to hear you say, wow, the possibility it could all go right. Like, I get that. I totally get that, because how many times have we talked about the duality of nature? And I do still see the duality of nature. Like, I'm interested to see where this book goes, but I'm also thrilled and exhilarated because I took the big leap with this other thing that I'm doing right now, and it has filled me full of energy. Like, I do feel on purpose. It is it's different when you're lit up, and we get unlit with our thoughts. So it's really important to keep those thoughts in line. I don't know how stronger to say it.
Yeah, it's funny when you said, about being lit up, it just made me think of, like some of the vernacular out there with some of the, oh, that's lit or oh, that's, and I'm like, oh, it just gave me a whole different picture. Sorry. Um, but I agree. I think when Samantha said that, I don't think we do look at that, at that possibility. I mean, and now I'm thinking of like Elon Musk and stuff, some of the things of how he's gotten himself to where he's at. I think that's part of what he uses to drive himself forward is he doesn't look at that negative and he doesn't listen to me, it sounds like he doesn't listen to a lot of the negative of what other people say. No, what if this really works? How can I get there to make this work? Like, because Starlink, like the Teslas when he was doing those, and some of the other things that he's, you know, I don't see anybody else really ever, having that ability to do that where, everybody else out there is saying, oh, well, it's, this, and he's just proving everybody wrong. Like, no, how, but I think in how he does that is somehow he's been able to grasp hold of, you know, instead of dialing into fear, he's breathing in what if this really works? How do I get there? How do I get to now making it work, and I think you're right, Catherine. I think we let thoughts, the negative thoughts that come about in our head, because I'm sometimes don't think we necessarily think them there. I think sometimes they just pop up out of just part of our innate makeup of what we've learned over our lives and what we dealt with in our lives, and some of it being just natural. It just somehow all of a sudden we go to that point of, oh well, because I did try this in the past, this will, instead of, going, no, what, and that I just agree. I think, maybe we need to really say more, just then say, what if this really works? And start repeating it over, kind of like the story, the little engine that could, instead of, believing that, oh, I think I can, I think I can, I think, keep going up that mountain. And as he's saying it, he went up and over that mountain. Well, what if this really works? What if this, and keep saying that as we're taking those exhilarating breaths rather than holding them, that I think gives us energy. And it sounds like that's something that you have, that you all of a sudden just added into you, Catherine, because you sound a little more energetic even, right now.
Yeah, yeah. I, I read a book a number of years ago about Elon Musk, and one of the things that, really struck me about him is his low tolerance for excuses and low tolerance for, fear talk and that kind of thing. And I was like, isn't that interesting that, we tend to have this low tolerance for allowing ourselves to feel good, and and even a low tolerance for believing that maybe something could work. I mean, how crazy is that, So I'm like, maybe I need to just turn that switch around and put my ego and say, hey, ego, here, let's just start having a low tolerance for excuses within ourselves in particular. I don't want excuses. I want solutions, and quit focusing on the fear and focus on the possibility, and that's where we need to, because I mean, we can do the same, we can doom and gloom ourselves all day long, right? And make ourselves feel like, I don't know if I can make this work, I don't know if I can, or this could happen or that could happen or blah blah blah, rather than just being focused on it's all good, it's great, it's going to work somehow, we're going to find the solution, we're going to work through it, and um yeah, it's interesting is Because I mean, our ego is going to be there regardless, right? And what we tell it to focus on, we kind of start programming it to focus on one thing or another. Why don't we get it to focus on, having a low tolerance for excuses and reasons why things can't. So,
Yeah, we have all these, what do you want to call them, cliches or whatever, that thoughts are things. And then what you said, Catherine, about thoughts don't have any power or whatever. And that's not what you said, but along that line, and growing up with the idea that don't tell me you can't. Just not allowed to say I can't. But everything you turn around, oh, I can't do that. I'm 8 years old. I can't pick up that 70-pound toolbox and carry it across the yard. So it's more than just, there is a lot to do with the power of your thoughts. If you think you can't, you won't. So
I was going to say, I think Samantha brought up a nice little point, and I think this is a little bit of what Catherine was even alluding to a little bit earlier. Is I think we've given our ego more control over things that go on rather than us dictating the control for our ego what to do. I think when you just said that little bit there, it's like, wow, the ego tends to drive us rather than us driving the ego, and making the ego the bit player in the play rather than the star. And a lot of times people make it the star and they're the bit player, and rather than reversing that and using that for good, because I agree. I don't think the ego is really going to necessarily go totally away, but I think you can bring it down to size to where it works for you rather than against you.
yeah, for sure. I was thinking about just a minute ago when you were talking, and I was watching this. Well, it kind of came up earlier when we were talking about the swimming pool and the cold and that kind of that jumping, just jump in thing that Lori said. I was watching this cliff diving competition, only they were doing it from a platform in Boston, and it was live just like the other day. So freaking cold. Anyway, on a whole different aspect of that. Oh, hey Jason, have a good afternoon. Oh, well, he's gone already. Okay. He I was thinking about this on the aspect of sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Years ago, we studied the book Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, and he talks a lot about visualizing what you want to happen, and it's a tool that athletes use a lot, of visualizing things happening the way you want them to. And I'm like, if we focus on causing ourselves to be successful in a kind of visualization kind of thing, isn't that kind of like getting our ego to focus on that, if you will? Or like so like for athletes, for instance, ones that are very, very successful, they put it in their mind, they visualize the outcome, and then it's like the ego becomes that by what they're visualizing. And I can see this in like different aspects of my life. Like years ago when I was in the pet grooming industry, I would tell myself that I was not a speed groomer. I was very meticulous about my work, and that was very important to me, and that was like I was really good at what I did, and that was kind of like an ego thing, right? But that was part of my identity, if you will, was that I was good at my job, and everybody appreciated me for being good at my job and for taking care of the animals in the way that I did. And yet then, later in my life, after I'm like this whole trucking thing comes up, and all I can think about is how everything went to pot when we did it before. So I'm like, how can I, if I say I wanted to change this attitude about who I am in relation to this business and what that means for us, is that I could then visualize myself as a very successful trucking company owner who has the safest fleet and the least number of incidents in the last 10 years or whatever compared to everybody else. Or, I could visualize myself in that same way rather than being focused on all the shit that could happen. It's like, just Chris has sent me two different pictures in the last week of trucks that have crashed and burned. I mean, literally, one of them crashed and burned up, and then the other one just caught on fire. And it was for the company that we had been doing business with for a while. And apparently, they have had multiple trucks in the past just few years that have either caught fire, been struck by lightning, have gotten into an accident and burned up, have they've lost a bunch of trucks recently. And I'm wondering, now that we're having these conversations, it's like, what is their CEO focused on? I mean, this is a successful big company, and I'm sitting here going, oh shit, what if that happens to us? And I'm like, no, I need to not focus on that. I need to focus on, I need to have this visualization that, we're the safest out there. We're the ones that people appreciate working for. We those kinds of things versus, who knows what their CEO is focused on, but they're struggling right now. They've had some big hits, and I don't want that to happen to us at all. I don't see how it could, because we wouldn't hire people in the way that they do. But anyway, back on track. Being focused on, get my ego to work for me in terms of make myself think, okay, I'm just this really successful business owner versus when's the shit gonna hit the fan kind of thing. And
That's an interesting point, and hopefully Catherine will help me if I get lost in what I'm thinking out of what you said. Will maybe be able to help a little bit here. But like what you were talking about, where you're thinking of how you want and where you want to focus the ego on, and like you said, like the athletes and all that, where they focus, and that's what you want to do. But I think you also want to get you and your employees all thinking in that same vein, help build them with that process too, to where they see it, if you get what I'm saying. Because then it carries that over from you into them, and it becomes something they believe. And I think that's something I think Elon Musk has done in his company, because I don't think he really allows the employees really to get into that self-negative or self-doubt, or he has some way of being able to, I think, bring them back around that, no, look what we've done. We were already here. How much farther can we go? And I don't know if there's a term for that, or if that's why I'm we're hoping Catherine might know or understand or better. But I think there's a way you can do that, to where, because maybe part of what this company is the CEO is focusing on this, drivers are focusing on this, other employees are focusing on this, and you got too many egos focused on so many different things. Where does the overall focus of the whole company go? And I think that can lead to companies' downfalls, and kind of like Rome burning, back in the days, as they got so and so, kind of, a lot of what we see out there in the world, there's so much, and people are not realizing, that if they can get their ego focused on that, and maybe get those of their family and their friends maybe seeing that and going and helping them understand that, with their own lives. And then, so I think there's, that's something to be said for that. And I think that's something that can help businesses too, if you can get everybody kind of on the same path, on the same, for lack of a better way, is the ego path, so to speak, or seeing that same vision and believing it and understanding it and carrying it forward.
Yeah, I agree, Dan, and I will tell you this is that, when I had my pet grooming business, I hadn't studied any of this stuff. And I just knew what I stood for, if you will. It was like, this is me, this is what I stand for in this business. And one thing that's interesting about that is that when we are working from the inside out, and I've noticed this a lot, in my family and in my relationship with my husband in particular, is that when I am focused on things going well, everybody else just seems to kind of fall in line. Not because I'm telling them to necessarily, but because I'm putting out this energy of such. And like when I was in my previous business, I don't really remember saying specifically, this is what we're about necessarily in terms of, being the best of the best of the best, but that was the attitude that I had. And whether we were the best of the best, I don't know. I think that's subjective, when it comes to your customers. But that was the air that I put out, and that's the attitude that I had. And I can see, looking back, that my employees naturally went with that. And I feel like now looking at it from this different perspective, that the same thing could hold true in this business just as easily, as if this is what I'm focused on and this is the attitude that I have, rather than worried when the shit's going to hit the fan, is that if I'm driving, everybody in the bus is following me regardless. You know what I'm saying? And so even if they're all having their own little conversations and blah, blah, blahs and their life experiences and whatever, they're still back there on the same bus that I'm driving with the attitude. And if I am grumpy at the wheel, everybody behind me is going to be grumpy too. If I'm fearful at the wheel, that tension is going to flow behind me as well. And so if I can be positive and with a focus of success and with a focus of safety and well-being of my people, that I feel like will naturally, they'll do the same without me necessarily having to specifically like line out a employee action plan of, let me make sure I'm telling everybody this and that and the other. But it's just to allow this attitude of success to guide me, and then what I'm compelled to do in any given moment is going to be driven by that versus driven by my fear. And so my interactions with my employees will reflect that, and my interactions with my coworkers, my husband and my son, will reflect that. And yeah, because I feel like for myself over the years of like even driving a truck for myself, or drive my car or whatever, I always had this attitude that, I'm a safe and conscientious driver, and I'm never in a hurry. I'm this and that and the other. And I didn't feel like I got into tangles with, I didn't get into accidents, obviously, but I didn't feel like circumstances were presented to me that would cause an accident. It was like I wasn't running into, because I didn't have the attitude that, I could whatever at any given time. I didn't have that experience, whereas my husband always is experiencing road rage. I guess that's what I was getting at. I didn't experience other people having road rage around me because I didn't have road rage, and whereas my husband tends to have this kind of road ragey attitude, and then he experiences a lot of other people with that. So I think that what we kind of like are, what drives us is what drives the energy around us. So I don't know why I didn't even think about this before. Oh my gosh.
See how helpful the books are sometimes. uh, I was just going to say, I have to kind of make this comment. We know how helpful a lot of the books have been over the years and what they've done and stuff. And I think we keep, finding and learning new things about ourselves and understanding things about ourselves more. But there's so much out there, excuse me, to learn and gain and get that, I think that's part of the journey, is to continue searching, asking, growing, questioning, things, and then inherently still keeping whatever we fundamentally believe in. And so that way we're not going against our own core self either. But it's interesting how, we keep having some things kind of re-pop up periodically, or help, or bring things back into focus again. And that's what I love about the fact that, with our group, and, how we continually, build up and try and, learn and grow and check out new things, because, there's always somebody out there discovering something new and, helpful. So that's good. And I think, for all of us, we all help each other too. So in that sense, I think that's another very positive and powerful thing too. So it's 8 o'clock. So I don't know, any last thoughts or anything from anybody, or last ideas?
Well, I think our ego, I mean, it can only work from the past, right? So that's what it bases all of its decisions on. I mean, you can't really blame it. If you sometimes look at your past, you can't blame your ego why it acts the way it does. But it's almost like the ego doesn't recognize that there could be the possibility of just good, because it only can look from the past, and it sees that things haven't always been good in the past. So that is sort of like a mind-blowing concept to the ego, that things could actually just work out perfectly. And as, like you said, Samantha, maybe as things might come up, they may just be taken care of, and it's just another stepping stone. And I mean, we have to keep growing and learning, otherwise we wouldn't keep reincarnating. So we have eternity. I mean, we get bored if we just decided not to learn anything else anymore. But it's hugely interesting how you can step away from all of that into a world of nothing but possibilities. You can, and you can access that information, and that's what's super cool. And I have to say, he talks about excitement and exhilaration, and I just wonder, and I don't know if he'll bring this up later or not, because I'm not reading ahead, but I just wonder how many times as a kid, because Laura, you brought up something that came up when you were 8. So how many times as a kid were you in pure exhilaration, like you were just going 300 miles an hour, man, and then all of a sudden a parent or a neighbor in my time just had enough of that and whacked the shit out of you. You know what I mean? Just like, or screamed at you, or like put you in your room, or just threw you out of the pack. temporarily, of course, but maybe you didn't realize that at the time. You know what I mean? Like that could have been a life-threatening response that you received as a child. You know what I'm saying? Because kids, they're just like going, they're just off the charts. And all of a sudden, like my son used to do it on Mountain Dew. Oh my God, I could tell when that kid drank Mountain Dew. He would just, and I could take it for so long, and then all of a sudden I had just had enough, and maybe that's all I said. Maybe I just gave him the look, and I'm like, enough. But I didn't realize how forceful that really was to him. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying this like this you know what I'm saying? Like this is an example that I can come up with, because I don't think my son even cared, because he was caffeinated out his eyeballs. But uh, but I'm just saying, like, how many times have we been in pure exhilaration as a child, and then wham, like the book slammed down on us, And so maybe we subconsciously, our ego kind of remembers that when we start getting too excited, it's just like, uh-oh, like that hand is going to come up from behind my head and just whack the shit out of me. you like, and maybe that's where that comes from. I don't know, but it could be. It's a possibility, right? But how long can we keep living from our childhood too? Like sometimes we have to recognize, oh, that's where that came from. Okay, let me step off away from that now, because this is like 58 years later. still I'm still working off that same ego memory, so, and maybe the world isn't as scary as I thought. I mean, don't watch the news, because that'll totally blow that theory. But what I'm saying is, like, we have to you do have to shelter yourself sometimes. I do. I'm not saying you do, but I do. I have to shelter myself. And it's not to say that I don't have any clue as to what's going on in reality here. I do, but that's what I step my toe into. I step my toe into that reality, and I stay out in the world of possibilities rather than the other way around. You know what I mean? So anyway, I hope you guys have a great week, because I'm having a magical time over here, and I love you.
Love you too. And we still have that polarity, the balance that, okay, everything's going so good, but how does that, you got to know the bad so you know that it is good. I don't know. Y'all have a good week.
I feel like I've had enough bad that I could recognize. I don't need it anymore. No, when you were just talking, Catherine, and you mentioned the ego working from the past, it works from these memories, and I was reminded of the book by Joe Vitale that I read a number of years ago called The Remembering Process. And the premise of this book was that you follow the memory of your future. Like, it was a weird kind of mind-boggling quantum physics-y blah, 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 blah of method of using your imagination and allowing the future to come through your imagination as a memory of the future that you want to have. Does that make sense? So it's like similar to visualizing what you want to have. So, but the idea is to change this kind of connection in your brain, because our brains are weird and they work in weird ways, and we don't really even know how they work, and we don't even really know whether or not we're in the present, past, future, whatever at any given moment. And so he was like, it was just interesting, because it was kind of like taking the two things together, taking this idea of creating a visualization, like what Maxwell Maltz talked about. He was like, visualize the outcome. But Joe Vitale was talking about visualize what's already happened for you, because then it changes something in your mind or in your brain or in your ego, if you will. If the ego thinks it's already happened, then obviously it's going to happen, you know? So interesting, interesting. We could create a memory, and technically it is a memory because it will you have thought of it when you were thinking of it, and now when you're in the future, you're acting out this thought that you thought that was in the past. So your ego doesn't know the difference between the past, the present, and future, right? So how does it know that that didn't actually happen when you visualized it in your mind and suggested this is a memory of the future?
No, but it's so true. And the body doesn't, it can't make the difference, you know, whether you're just thinking about it and experiencing it in your thoughts and your imagination, or whether it's actually happening to you. And you can do many exercises yourself to prove that to yourself, that you can change how your body feels. You can change how your body feels just by how you think about somebody else, much less yourself. You know what I mean? So, you know, you can test that theory all day long. Think different thoughts about people and see how your body changes in response to that. So since the body doesn't know the difference, that's why that works for those athletes. You know, they see that in their head over and over and over and over. And then how else could it happen, really? You know, like that's how it happens. And it doesn't always happen that way, but it doesn't matter, because if you are feeling it, okay, Lori, you're stuck inside, and I'm sure you've proven this to yourself over and over in this past month or plus now, maybe. I don't remember exactly when this started, but you know, you can't get out of your building. You can't. So physically, but that doesn't stop your mind at all. Like, you have internet, you have Google, you can go anywhere in the world and do anything you want. And I'm sure that you have proven that to yourself just by being in a wheelchair and having some physical limitations. You know, you can always in your mind picture that you can do it. And as long as you can do it or can't, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean, it does matter. I don't mean to like totally disregard your feelings about it. But what I'm saying is, you can drive, and you've said it so many times, it's how you respond to that. So it doesn't matter that you're stuck there, because you're really as free or freer than anybody else, because people are actually stuck in their job cubicles all day, and they're stuck in places where they hate to be. At least you're stuck at home where you hopefully love to be. Although I know you miss those beautiful fall Colorado the aspens changing and all that, and I'm sure you'll get out and get to enjoy that, because they're going to fix your elevator. But when, you know, that's what my physical pain and limitations has taught me, is how to pay attention to my body in response to the thoughts that I'm having, and how to do things in my, as a matter of fact, when I was at a point where I was completely bedridden and I couldn't exercise anything, I was doing exercises in my head, to keep the, like, just to, I believed that it kept me going. And, you know, I don't know if that's true or not. It doesn't matter, because I believed it, and now I'm going. So there you go. You know what I
There you
mean?
go.
Like, it doesn't matter as long as we believe.
I think you did keep yourself going. I think you focused on that rather than giving up. Because so many people maybe in your situation would have given up. They would have seen, thinking, oh, this is futile. I'm never going to get up. I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to get there. Rather, you in your head said, no, I'm going to focus on mentally doing exercises. I'm going to focus mentally on saying that I will get here and I will get there. And I think that's, you know, a powerful thing, because I think that's what helps keep the difference between somebody I'm going to use a very bad analogy, but in my mind, it seems to work. And I'm going to use the incidents of those that were involved in the Donner Pass incident. They found a way to keep going. Granted, it may not have been the most ideal way of going or continuing or living, but based on the realities, they found a way to survive. You know, not everybody else would have done that because they would have given into their own, like, oh, well, that's wrong, or that's, well, sometimes just because it's wrong does not necessarily mean that to live and survive and to carry on, you have to be willing to sometimes make those decisions for yourself and go to those things to decide that I'm going to continue, I'm going to exist, I'm going to, I'm not going to let this defeat me. And I think that's what you did, Catherine. I think you made the decision that I'm not going to let this be the end. I'm going to continue. I'm going to, use my thoughts, use my energy, use my everything that God gave me to use to continue forward. And I think he gave you that ability to continue forward to where you are and look at you now.
That's how it has to be. That's what survival of the fittest. You have to become more fit. You have to just go with the flow. You can throw a whole bunch of cliches or whatever, but I think it kind of blows that whole never say you can't idea out. I don't know. I suppose we better move on.
Yeah, it's 8:17. It seemed like it was just a minute or two ago that I was saying it's a little after 8. So with that, thank you everybody for jumping on to the Saturday Morning Mastermind as we cover the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. We'll continue on next week, starting with, I gotta find it again. Starting with Moving Beyond the Hardest Part on page 19 in the first chapter still. So with that, bye everybody. See you next week.